Okay, so last time I said I would be back with George H.W. Bush, but not quite yet. We still have some more Ronald Reagan. I'm not sure what I was thinking because we need to talk about Ronald Reagan's foreign policy. So, just a recap of the key terms and then these key can you statements. President Ronald Reagan believed that the United States had lost its way in the wake of the Vietnam War. Rather than détente, you remember détente with Nixon and the easing of tensions, he felt that the United States should seek to roll back Soviet rule in Eastern Europe and elsewhere. So this is different. So remember, containment, keep it where it is, don't let it spread. Détente, relax some tensions, some diplomatic engagement, some economic engagement. Roll back is different, right? Roll back isn't containment, certainly not détente. It's pushing communism back. Reagan believed that peace would come through strength, and he actually called it peace through strength. Although Reagan's foreign policies initially increased tension between the two superpowers, they did contribute to the end of the Cold War. And I want you to look at this these charts that have to do with the amount of defense spending Reagan is doing. He is outspending the Soviets. So what Reagan was very smart to realize is that for every, I'm just going to use like a random figure here. Let's say for every 5 nuclear warheads the United States makes, the Soviets were building 5 or 6 to keep up with or outpace the United States. But Reagan also understands that the American economy is much stronger than the Soviet economy, and that the Americans can afford to outspend the Soviets, and that as the Soviets attempt to keep up with American military spending, what will ultimately happen is that they will bankrupt themselves. That is what ultimately happens. They cannot keep up with this massive campaign of American military spending, and they die out. They were already headed in that direction, and this just accelerates it. What it means in the United States is that, remember I said there's a good reason why Reagan is willing to extend the deficit or go further into debt. This is that reason, to drive the Soviets into bankruptcy and extinction. So you do see that come to fruition, but with pretty significant economic cost to the United States. So Reagan calls for peace through strength. The goal is to outspend and bankrupt the Soviets, as well as to fight terrorism, for example, in places like Libya. As the deficit grows, people grow concerned, but also new jobs are created in defense industry. So although Reagan is a supply sider, there's also a little bit of pump priming going on with his defense spending. The Reagan doctrine in terms of foreign policy is to support guerrilla fighters working to overthrow communist governments. So he is not going to send troops into these places to push back communism, but he will send arms and financial support to those who are attempting to overthrow those governments. And we're going to look at just a few: Afghanistan, Nicaragua, and Grenada. Reagan says every country and every people has a stake in Afghan resistance, for the freedom fighters of Afghanistan are defending principles of independence and freedom that form the basis of global security and stability, which is wonderful, except again, those freedom fighters are the Taliban. This is great. Okay, so Reagan also promotes something called SDI, strategic defense. The idea is that we're going to have space-based weapons that can shoot down missiles aimed at the United States. The nickname for this plan was Star Wars because it seemed so far-fetched. I don't know that it seems that far-fetched today. If the Soviets launched a bomb at us, that one of our satellites could strike it out of the sky before it got to us. That's the idea. Reagan is also almost impeached in his second term over something called the Iran-Contra affair. There are 2 issues at play. The first issue is that the administration, Reagan's administration, sells weapons to rebels in Nicaragua, despite the fact that Congress had banned the sale of weapons to Nicaragua. The second issue is that Reagan's administration had paid Iran in weapons in exchange for hostages. Remember that? The profits were then sent to the Contras in Nicaragua. And all of this had been done in secret. Congress feels that this is a bit of a form of money laundering. Reagan uses this man right here, Oliver North, as a bit of a scapegoat for the process. Reagan ends up, they launch an investigation into it. Reagan is never directly implicated, but there's some lingering questions about what he knew and what he didn't know.
Unfortunately, their predictions were right. As I said to you in March, I let my preoccupation with the hostages intrude into areas where it didn't belong. The image,
So he takes responsibility, but doesn't ever have to face like a consequence for that. 1991 is also a turning point in American and world history. In a little over 3 years' time after Reagan's speech in Moscow, the Cold War comes to an end. The Berlin Wall comes down. Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary all hold democratic elections, and the Soviet Union crumbles, disintegrates into numerous separate republics. Time magazine says, quote, "It was one of those rare times when the tectonic plates of history shift beneath the man's feet, and nothing after is quite the same." This is an image from Reagan speaking in 1987 at the Brandenburg Gate near the Berlin Wall, where he famously says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Détente is in question. There's that image of him with Star Wars, budget battles in Star Wars. It says this SDI, or the Strategic Defense Initiative. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev comes to power, and he knows that he can't keep pace with U.S. spending. This is MAD. It's called mutually assured destruction. The idea that I need to have as many weapons as you do so that, if you launch a weapon at me, I can launch a weapon back. By December of 1987, they have negotiated the INF, or an Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and the Soviet Union is beginning to relax both political and economic communist leanings. We have glasnost and perestroika, which I'll talk about in 1 second. This is Reagan giving that speech that I mentioned, and actually this is kind of long, so I don't think I will play this. I'll put that on Schoology as well. So this is a little map of the disintegrating USSR. The date on there indicates the end of communist control, so between 89 and 91. Okay, so I said I was going to talk about glasnost and perestroika. So this topic really straddles Reagan and Bush, George H.W. Bush, but glasnost means openness. It is a political term. In the Soviet Union, it means that the Soviet people will have access to more freedoms. And perestroika is an economic term. It means restructuring, where although they will maintain their communist structure, they will allow for more private enterprise. This is Mikhail Gorbachev. He's got a really famous birthmark that looks like Italy on his forehead. And then in the middle there, that's Boris Yeltsin. In 1989, there are revolutions all across Eastern Europe, and ultimately the Berlin Wall comes down. Gorbachev will declare an end to the USSR in 1991. Here's some footage of the wall coming down.
Again, stroll the length of the neighborhood, but the bitter memory of the Berlin Wall won't die quickly.
As long as that cruel, terrible thing is still standing, I don't know. Ask me later when they're turning it down.
Trying to get to the parts where...
Understand?
I'm trying not to make you watch the whole 6 minutes.
They're about to be made whole again after nearly 3 decades.
A neighborhood party, Berlin style.
There's a big hole in the second wall.
On the east side of the Berlin Wall, something new tonight. Soldiers dismantling it, not guarding it with rifles. And on the west, the fire department doing its part to open a...
So, we will continue this time with George H.W. Bush next time.